Thank you for joining us today for our 2024 US Data and AI Salary Guide launch. For those of you who are not too aware about the Harnham Group, we're actually the world's largest data and AI talent solution provider. So everything we do is around fostering talent into the data and AI space, and we've been doing this now for close to 2 decades. So we actually have 5 pillars within the Harnham Group. The first 2 pillars are both permanent and contract recruitment for the global market, covering everything from entry level right the way through to executive leadership positions in the field. And anything more on the leadership side will be handled by our executive search function. Our other 2 pillars fall under Rockborn, which is our award-winning data and AI consultancy that follows the ATD approach. So after an intensive 12-week program, we actually deploy data graduates on site with our clients, which is helping to fill an ever-growing skills gap in the industry. And our final offering is around our training. And this is rolled out for our clients by our brilliant data coaches at Rockborn, and they cover everything from data engineering to analytics to prompt engineering and Gen AI upskilling. I'm based in our New York office, but we do actually have offices globally. We have 3 offices across North America in San Francisco, Phoenix, and New York. And from there, we cover east to west. We also have coverage over in the UK and Europe with offices in London, the Netherlands, and France. So for over a decade now, our annual salary guides have been offering unparalleled insights from the largest census of data and AI professionals across the world. So containing up-to-date salary breakdowns, hiring trends, and market snapshots, our salary guides present a clear picture of the data and AI landscape and the factors affecting talent today. So this year, we had over 4,500 respondents and more than 180,000 data points collected. And our analysis includes Harnham's placement data over the past 12 months, those roles recruited by Harnham in the US, and data roles that are advertised online. So in today's session, we're actually going to be covering some of the key findings and overarching trends from this year's report. Before we do that, we'll just do a quick introduction. So I'll start with myself. So as you can see, my name's Jenni Kavanagh. I'm a vice president here at Harnham, sat in our New York office. And I have over a decade of experience recruiting into the data and AI space. I currently run all of our East Coast operations and focus predominantly on permanent recruitment. Sam, why don't you jump in next?
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Sam Agre. I'm one of the managers here in our New York office. I manage our machine learning operations, our AI, and our data science functions. And I work on anything from, like Jenny had mentioned, those kind of senior level roles all the way through sitting on our exec search function here in New York City.
Perfect. Kyle?
And good morning from out west. I am Kyle Anzalone. I'm Associate Vice President. Sit out of our Phoenix office, work with the West Coast business out here and everything data and AI.
Jayme?
Hello, I'm Jayme Oshaben. I'm a Senior Growth Manager at Harnham. I've been here for about 4 years, and I manage our global partnerships for contract and permanent recruitment.
Awesome. Thank you. So this year, our guide dives a little deeper into AI than it actually has in previous years. So I think that is probably a good place for us to start. And first and foremost, there's been a huge change within our industry over the last 12 months with the evolution and growth of generative AI. Now, AI is actually projected to contribute to over $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. And fortunately for us, it's estimated to create 133 million new jobs by 2030. But Sam, referencing the guide, I'm actually going to hand over to you because I know you'll definitely have some thoughts on the AI market.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Jenny, those numbers make me extremely excited, being someone who recruits in the AI space. So that's great news. If you could say those 6 more times, that would be really good. But I think the really fun part about this AI upward trajectory is how many other jobs it produces, right? You have your AI engineers, but I think what people and really strong data organizations are starting to understand is that from a data infrastructure, from a data engineering problem that AI has kind of created, right? The companies that ingest data the right way, who sort it the right way, they're the ones who are able to maximize their AI capacity. So I'm really not surprised at all that it's expected to create over 133 million new jobs. And the fun part about the guide for me was seeing all these tangible stats, right? Also not surprised to see that the 64% of companies currently use AI and that another 39% believe that large language models, generative AI rollout within organizations are going to have the biggest impact on their data. For me, great news, right? And so there's so many companies right now that are creating like an AI for X. You enter the domain, whether it be accounting, AI for mentorship, AI for you enter it. And these companies are doing such great work within the R&D space. And it's just pushing innovation. So we're really seeing such a trend right now. And so some companies have really utilized their AI capacities, putting the right resources to the right people. And this has really helped a lot of companies push the boundaries, but it also has created a lot of competition. Like I kind of mentioned at the beginning here, it's creating so many more roles across product manager roles, from data engineering to so many different things that aren't AI, but are AI adjacent. And it's making data functions much more relevant. And I guess that it's probably a good segue to pass to our friend Jayme here, because she knows more about the data engineering space than I certainly do. So Jayme, I'm curious where you're at on this.
Yeah. As you touched on, I think it's not just AI specific roles that are being created out of this boom. It's also filtering down to changes in demand for the other roles that are basically preparing and managing the data necessary for AI applications. So for instance, what I've been seeing is a huge increase for data engineering, platform engineering, software engineering, and DevOps to support all of these AI and ML teams to make sure that they're running efficiently and have the back end set up correctly. Kyle, I know you work a lot more on like the data governance. What are you seeing from adoption versus governance perspective?
Yeah, those are all great points. I think one of the key statistics that we have in our findings is almost 70%, 67% exactly, respondents reported viewing AI positively, but only 40% of companies have an official AI policy because, as Sam hit on, a lot of companies are at the early stages of creating an AI product and understanding the roadmap of how to get there. So we see a lot of the product managers, project managers, and back-end kind of architecture, setting up the plans, understanding what they need out of the platform. And with that, as things start to get created and these teams build out and projects move down the roadmap, the keyword that Sam hit on is ingestion. It's all about the data you're putting into it for the product that you're creating, and then comes data governance. Not just to understand that they're using the correct data that's best fit for purpose and going to answer the problem statements in the best way, but also creating data stewards on the other teams outside of the data team, engineering teams, and the people that are using this day to day. Because you could create the best AI platform, but if the other teams aren't using it best fit for purpose within the business, it can kind of fall flat. So data governance, I think we've seen a big uptick for the last couple of years, and it's just going to continue to grow tenfold, as well as the product managers to really make sure things are on the right track and getting built best fit for purpose with those roadmaps. Jenni, what are you seeing in terms of recruitment and skill set perspective?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one of like businesses really do see the potential, but sometimes they're not quite sure how to go about it. And from an actual recruitment perspective and a skills perspective, when we're speaking to people about the adoption of AI and how they're going to look at it, it's quite clear that at the moment the understanding of AI isn't totally quite there just yet. So the job market hasn't quite caught up with where the hype is at the moment. So for example, we have businesses wanting to see candidates with things like 7 years of experience in AI. Well, where we're at on our journey to AI right now, that doesn't quite exist because AI in its current format today hasn't actually been around that long. And as I said at the start, this is the first year we're really seeing this growth and evolution of AI being a key component into the data market. So it's interesting to think about what other skill sets employers are looking for, or how candidates can really upskill themselves. And so I guess I'm going to come back to you again, Sam. Like, can you give some advice on people as to how they could potentially stand out as a candidate in this evolutionary role?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a part that I'm really looking forward to chatting about. And I knew that we were going to get a question like this because at least I hope that a handful of people are in this space and looking for the next role. And so I want to just, like Jenni had mentioned, talk about how can candidates stand out, right? And we all look at resumes probably for too much of our day. And so do hiring managers. So I think the really fun thing is how can you make yourself stand out? And it's tough, right? Because it is relatively new. Jenni, you had mentioned 7 years AI experience. Good luck. That's not really a thing. So when I look at a resume, when I talk to candidates, is how can you tell me a story? How can you differentiate yourself, right? I see so many resumes that say LLM on it 1 billion times. Utilize ChatGPT, but that's what every resume says. What I really challenge candidates to do right now is show what you did, show a project that you did. What were the results of it? Almost use a STAR technique on your resume. What did you do? What was the situation? What was the result of it? And make something tangible, because that is what's going to differentiate yourself right now. Saying that you used cutting edge AI, that's not really making you stand out in the market. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out directly with the resume. I'd love to kind of chat with you through it. And I'm just really curious to see how people are gonna, over the next year, when they do have tangible results, be able to differentiate yourself in the market. Because to be honest, a lot of resumes look eerily similar right now. Yeah, I mean, Jenni, if you have any questions for me off of that, I'm happy to go deeper. It's just a lot of, honestly, what I call internally buzzword soup, which is probably not the best way to say it on something like this, but it is how many buzzwords can I get into this section of my resume?
Yeah, it's interesting because, from the survey, AI at the moment is actually mainly being used for code generation. So I think it was 23% of respondents said that's what they're using it for. And then that was quite closely followed by inspiration and ideas at 21%. And finally, in third spot there, 20% of people said it's being used for research. And out of those, ChatGPT was actually the most common used AI tool over the last 12 months at 54%, which was then followed by LLM and other AI at 19%. So I'm really interested to see how that would transition over the next 12 months out of the ideas and research and into the actual code generation. I imagine will get higher.
Yeah.
So just if you're joining us, we're actually just talking about Harnham's US salary guide, which released today. So if you missed the start of this chat, the full video will be available on our LinkedIn page at the end of the session. But I want to just move on to another area that has been huge in the US over the last 12 months, and that is actually contract recruitment. Now, it's really interesting. We've seen a huge growth in this area, and it's not surprising in regards to where the economy has been over the last couple of years that people are moving towards short-term resources. But actually now 15% of data and AI teams are now contractors, and that's actually likely to increase. So when we've asked businesses like their main reasons for this, 45% of employers have said this is actually due to project needs. 29% stated that it was for short-term cover, and 22% highlighted that it was about budget restrictions. So that isn't surprising to me where we are, but it is good to see growth in this area. And actually, at the end of a contract, 18% of people were offered a full-time permanent position, which is lower than it was last year. So last year it was 21%. So of those that were offered, 33% of people then accepted that permanent role. And that is down significantly. Last year that was 54%, which just highlights the growth of opportunity within contract and how people are actually choosing to become a little bit more specialized and maybe move around from project to project, as opposed to do a short-term contract and convert into perm. And also the average length of contract extensions actually more than halved to actually 35 weeks from 35 weeks in 2023 down to 17 weeks this last year. But Jayme, again, you do a lot more in our contract division with some of our larger clients. So I'm curious, why do you think there's been a reduction in candidates now being offered permanent positions? And I guess also maybe a reduction in the frequency and length of contract extensions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say in terms of the reduction of permanent positions being offered, I think that's because a lot of these contracts that are written out are project-based hires. And so there actually may not be a long-term need for these contractors to stay within the business for the foreseeable future. So that could be one reason. And then in terms of the extensions, companies are doing a really good job at long-term project planning. And so in this case, they know, hey, this contract or this project will be, 12 months instead of predicting short term and then keep extending from there. So instead of just writing out that 3-month contract, they're seeing the need for the 8, 10, 12 months. And because they're writing them out longer, initially the extensions just aren't necessary. And then another reason is honestly, contractors are pretty efficient. So they can come in, work efficiently and complete the project quicker than expected, and then move on to a new project, a new company who are doing similar things. So there's kind of a variety of different reasons that, extensions are down and conversions aren't there. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Jenni, do you mind if I come in for 1 second here on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think, and just because while we're sticking on the AI trend for just a second before we get away, is when we think about how many companies are trying to implement AI when it comes to more internal customers, right? If you're a large organization, even small, if you can have someone extremely accessible to ask a question, right, via some chatbot or via some large language model, and this is a one-time fix. We don't need someone constantly updating it, but we just need it done once. It's a perfect job for contract. It's a perfect thing where someone can implement it in a couple of months, especially knowing that a contractor is coming in who's done this twice before at other organizations, right? They've done it before. It's such a great use, and we're seeing so many clients opt for something like that. It's a one-time fix. It's only for our internal customers, and specifically within the AI space, we're seeing that being done so much. All right, so that was my little caveat. I'm good here on contract for me.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's exactly the reason why 45% of people said they're using it for project needs. I think the other piece I wanted to bring up was the budget restrictions, because I think one thing that we see quite often is actually the budget for contractors comes separately to a recruitment budget. So where a lot of companies have really struggled to get permanent roles approved internally, if they've got a personal budget or a team budget that they can use, contractors seem to be a bit of a better option because it can come out of your own budget. And then if you do need the very specific AI projects, or you do need something really specific done for a short period, it can come out your team budget. So I just thought that was a very interesting stat that I assume we'll see a lot larger next year. But before we move on to the next section, I just want to give another quick reminder that if you would like to access the full data from the guide, including the full salary reporting and breakdown versus level and job title, as well as some of our exclusive commentary and key trends across all of our different disciplines, please visit the link that's actually in the comments below, where you can download the full guide. So moving on, the top technologies used. This is one of the areas that I'm always most excited to see and how it differs. And in top spot, which is not a surprise to me, was Python. And that was closely followed by AWS and Spark. So I think when you think of all the roles within data and AI, Python is a key component. Whether you're a data engineer or a machine learning engineer, or even, a customer analyst in the middle, there are so many packages within Python that can be used. And I do think that is, like I say, not a surprise that is now the most dominant technology. I was a little bit shocked that Spark has taken the third spot, but from what I'm hearing and seeing, it seems like a lot of things are now being built through Spark. But let's sort of go into slightly more specifics with the packages. So I guess Jayme, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, so from a data technology and software perspective, some of the tools that these professionals are using weren't listed on the top 3, but I'd say that they're becoming increasingly popular and in demand to employers. So these tools are, to support data and platform engineering for effective data management and processing. In this area, we're seeing, like you said, Spark being used, but as well as Kafka, Airflow, Snowflake. And then Docker and Kubernetes have been crucial for software development and deployment. So these technologies all can help build robust and scalable systems. So again, companies are really looking for candidates that have experience, hands-on experience with these skills. Sam, I guess, what are you seeing from the AI space?
It's a weird one, right? Because it's like, it isn't as centralized. I feel like a lot of organizations are fine-tuning for what they need internally. And so you could say, right, ChatGPT, I wouldn't really call that a tool, right? But how do we make what we're doing work for us? So there's 1,000 different things around, I guess, like as a bigger picture, you would call it maybe NLP, right? Get some area of natural language processing and make sure that what you're taking off the shelf is working for your company internally. But maybe we'll see that over the next year, but you can't just call something like a tool a large language model, right? Maybe in the next year we'll have something emerge, because it is a little bit of a space race right now as far as who's going to be the emerging top dog. But that's kind of what I'm seeing. And Jenni, I know you run the whole thing now, but I know your roots are in advanced analytics and more analytics based. So let's go to you.
Yeah, I think the advanced analytics perspective, these line up quite perfectly. So obviously Python is now the most dominant language in building predictive models. Years gone by, we probably would have seen an R in there as well, but now that wasn't even mentioned in the top 5. So Python, absolutely, for any sort of customer analytics, predictive modeling. Obviously AWS have sort of now taken the market by storm. I think they've got about 32% of the market. So again, not surprising that is the most dominant cloud. I would say from an advanced analytics perspective now, there is an expectation of people to have experience in cloud, which I think for the first time is truly starting to shine through in terms of requirements from people when they're looking to build their teams, and obviously SQL and Power BI. So, manipulation and visualization of data are still pretty big up there. And I think that won't be changing. But actually that does lead us on quite nicely, I think, to more like candidate sentiment in the market. And one of the other areas that I thought was really interesting from the guide is actually, how are candidates feeling about the market at the moment? And good enough, right? So 56% of people actually feel a lot more secure in their job in 2023. But this was actually lower than it was in 2021 and 2022. And that's not surprising based on, like I say, the last 18 months that we've had as an economy. But now it is proving to see more positive trends. So actually 63% of people would actually leave their current role for the right opportunity, which is a lot higher from 40% in 2023. And Kyle, I'm really interested to see what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I think this topic is really interesting. Not just looking at the numbers from 23 now into 24, but if you take a bigger picture look and look at 21, 22, and even pre-COVID times, and now kind of the new landscape, I think there's been quite a bit of a market correction happening over the last 18 months. When COVID hit and everybody went remote, there was a premium on talent. Everybody's remote. You can go find any engineer, any data scientist, any analyst in the country and get some top-notch deliverables. And there was a bit of a run on it We've seen a shift now to more hybrid localized jobs, which I think we'll hit on a little bit further here in a second. But with that came a bit of a market correction. And then in 23, obviously the economic climate affected how people were feeling in jobs. So it's not surprising at all to see the 56% feel more secure in their jobs right now than they did in 23. But that figure is lower than 21 and 22 because the market was just a little bit different. So I think we saw a bit of a downturn in 23, and now we're seeing an uptick again in 24, which is really exciting and good to see. And then the statistic for me is 63% would leave their current role right now for the right opportunity. And it's up from 40% in 23. The right opportunity, I think, can be relative to an individual. Obviously, going up from 23, I think a lot of people last year, if they had a good secure role and their jobs weren't affected by what was happening out in the market and the economy, were going to stay put. They didn't want to take the risk of making a move. So that number is naturally going to go up. And then when you add on top what the right opportunity looks like, if somebody is in hybrid, would prefer to be remote or vice versa, there's a lot of candidates that want to be in office and hybrid and are currently remote, that might mean the quote unquote right opportunity, which adds on to that percentage of people that would leave.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jenni.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, I think, on top of that, benefits play a huge part into it, which, we'll hit on next. So go right ahead, Jenni.
Yeah, I was just going to take us there. I was just actually going to identify that. I know we've got a couple of questions coming in. Please do keep them coming. We can see them coming in front of us, and we'll address as many as we can towards the end. So just please keep firing them through, and we will hit on those. But yeah, as Kyle mentioned, thinking about this remote working and actually benefits of a business, I think it's quite a nice transition to look at some of our remote working statistics from the guide from this year. So interestingly enough, there's actually been a 6% drop in the people working fully remote, which would play exactly into what you were saying there, Kyle, about there's more of a hybrid policy or a return to work options being put out for any new job offers. And then actually even some companies that allowed people to be remote. And interestingly enough, there's also been an 18% drop in workers that are based outside of the US. So that was 53% in 2023, and that's now down to 35%. And I think that plays into exactly what you were saying, is that people are now needing to return to the office more frequently. And this may be the reason now for less reliance on outside of country support. However, I think preferences vary a lot between states and roles and type of work. And I guess, Sam, maybe let's come to you, from an AI/ML perspective, in light of that research, innovation, ideas, what are you seeing from clients and candidates in your arena?
I think you just said it, right? The innovation is such a big piece of it. And so it does vary, like both of you guys have alluded to. I think when we go to our hubs in New York and San Francisco, just tech hubs, and I don't mean just for Harnham, but in general, there's so many companies that I alluded to earlier that are doing AI for X product, right? And some of those organizations are extremely small and they're growing. And so when you do have something like that, companies are trying to create such an identity and culture that isn't already established, right? So you do that honestly in person a lot of times. When you are trying to establish a culture and identity for the organization, being around your peers is extremely, extremely important. And I think we've seen on both coasts that some companies are even pushing 6 days in office at times, which was new to me, but you're not alone if you're doing it. You got to find someone at the right point in their life who's ready to take on something like that. And it's going to, like I said, that space race does exist. And sometimes that's what it takes. On the other hand, and this is more for smaller organizations, when I think about our larger organizations, when we talk about innovation, when you do have the support and resources that you don't need the ROI tomorrow. When we think about our brainstorming sessions, when we think about our actual whiteboarding sessions, a lot of organizations say, hey, let's get as many smart people in the room and work through problems together. No time lapse, no gap for when someone has to do something outside of work. It's how can we kind of lock the door and get something together. That's not to say that there isn't a time for going in the corner, hands on keys, and getting your work done. But when we talk about the innovation within the AI space, within the machine learning space, it's crucial. And I think we've seen a lot more back to work than what we were seeing. And that's how we're getting these really cool companies out the backside of it. So that was a wishy-washy answer, given the fact that each company is different. But I would say we are seeing a huge, especially in our tech hubs, of a push, especially within like R&D groups. I know, right, I'm speaking for the coast, but luckily we don't just have to work with the coast. And so I probably, Jayme, Kyle, I know Kyle, you probably have more to say, given you're a little bit not as coasty. I don't know the word for it. You tell me.
Central, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more with everything, all the points you made, Sam, and what you're seeing out in New York. We, as you go kind of into the Midwest and further west, we see more of a hybrid model. Now, we have clients that are still fully remote. We have clients that are 5 days in office. So there's kind of a mixture of it. But on the whole, it's mostly remote, 3-4 days in office a week. But one point you made about building a culture, collaborating, teamwork, and just being in kind of the same room, whiteboarding, I think is kind of the key factor. Even some of the fully remote roles that we are still seeing now have a bit of a preference or even a need for certain time zones. So their hours are lining up, and there's not gaps at the start or the end of the day, and they can get more of that collaboration. On top of that, a little bit of traveling to wherever the headquarters is a little more frequently than we saw 18-24 months ago. Before it was maybe once or twice a year. Now we're seeing like quarterly, maybe every other month sort of thing, to get that collaboration and culture piece. Jayme, you have a unique perspective. You work with some of our enterprise accounts nationwide. What are you seeing in terms of benefits and remote versus hybrid?
Yeah. I'm not seeing as much 100% remote that maybe we have in the past. I think a lot of these companies that are larger or global are requiring a hybrid, whether that's 2 or 3 days on site. And honestly, a huge emphasis on the leadership teams for being on site and having those face-to-face meetings and collaboration. But on the flip side, back to contractors, I've seen contractors have remained approvals to stay 100% remote. Again, as long as they're working in the company's core hours, attending meetings, and making sure that they're getting the deliverables done. A lot of those contractors are, not engaged. The back end engineers more so not engaging as much with stakeholders. So there's a lot more flexibility to stay home, head down, code, get the job done. But overall, I'd say hybrid is definitely popular amongst the clients that I'm working with on a larger scale.
Nice. And I guess then in terms of other benefits, it's no surprise year on year that health insurance remains the top benefit that candidates are really looking for and really diving into, followed by the work from home options. It's still quite high up there of people's preferences. But actually, interestingly enough, unlimited vacation days has made it into the top 5 benefits that people really consider. And that's the first time in the last 3 years that we've actually seen this come up. And so I'm interested, sort of open to the group, are you seeing candidates value flexibility and security over bonuses at the moment?
Well, Jenny, you're my boss. So if you could do that unlimited PTO thing, that would be just delightful. Is that your call? Sorry. No, but I think that there is that, right? There is such a care about flexibility as we go through a trend, and we go back to Kyle had kind of alluded back to a hybrid model. When it goes from someone not going to work or working from home to going to work, you have to think about these people who we're talking about are inherently trying to speed up processes. They're inherently trying to automate and make things done more efficiently. And what you're asking for when you're asking for someone to go back to work is take time and travel, pay expenses for travel, right? Spend less time at home with your loved ones. And so there is a shift, but as you can imagine, those things are a change in people's lives. And so going from completely work from home to a more hybrid model, it's no surprise at all to me that people value flexibility right now. Because with that flexibility, you said it's flexibility and security over bonuses. A bonus could be that you're not paying for transit. A bonus could be the fact that you don't have to spend your time, well, I'm in New York, in a hot subway for 45 minutes a day, right? It could mean a lot of different things. So I'm not surprised at all that people are looking for flexibility over a bonus right now that may or may not happen based on company projections, right? Flexibility is a whole different monster. But Jenni, just we'll talk about the unlimited PTO thing afterwards, if that's cool with you.
One thing to chime in here, if I could jump in, Jenni.
Are you going to do the PTO thing with me, Kyle, or no?
Sorry.
No. Are you gonna ask for unlimited PTO with me as well?
No. I think your points were really, really great, Sam. And going back to what we've seen over the last 18 to 24 months in the market correction and the change in potential flexibility when candidates are looking for work and considering making a move. A lot of the discussions that we have is, everybody has the wants and what are the needs and the big differences between that. So if you're a candidate or somebody on this call listening, thinking about making a move, take some time and really understand, like, hey, where what are the things I need? What are the things I would really love to have? And that will then help identify the roles that might be, jumping back up to an earlier point, of the right opportunity for you.
Exactly. Great point. And I think that leads us quite nicely on also the reasons why people decide to leave jobs in the first place. So not only thinking about what's important moving forward, but actually, not a shock, our number one spot is still salary dissatisfaction being the top reason for candidates to leave their job. I think, especially with there's a lot of transparency now across the US when you advertise in regards to what the salary offered is, even if that's a range. And that is sort of sparking a lot of people to really understand where they sit within that based upon their experience and then make a move off the back of that. In another one that actually came into the top 5 for the first time in 3 years, though, was companies downsizing or redundancies, which I'm quite interested to hear people's thoughts on that, based off the fact that this is the first time in the last 3 years that's made it so high on the list. And actually, another interesting one that maybe we can sort of put in this discussion together. Although salary dissatisfaction is the top reason for people to leave, people are actually looking for a salary increase of only 15% now, and last year that was 22%. So it seems to have sort of averaged out a little bit, and people are not asking for these crazy hikes. And it seems like people are just wanting to get in line with the market as opposed to crazy above it. So I guess gonna throw that out. Maybe Kyle, coming back to you.
Yeah, it's not terribly surprising. I think that percentage of average salary increase target that people that are making a move want almost comes from another year further in the rear. So if you think about going from 22 to 23, the market was red hot and everybody was still remote. So it's not surprising we saw that bit of a correction. And then overall, what we've been discussing already, the differences between fully remote and localized jobs, whether being in office or hybrid, changes a lot of that because the candidate pool is a little bit different. They don't have to pay premiums. I'll be really, really interested to see how this continues to evolve. I think we are seeing the correction coming from COVID, but we're approaching a bit of an equilibrium where it'll kind of even out and the market will stabilize a little bit. So over the next 12 months, it'll be interesting to see what these numbers do and eventually find our findings next year at this time to then look back and compare from 22 to 23, 4, and then 5 next year would be really, really cool to see. Jayme, what are you saying?
Yeah, I think honing in on the salary, like expectations lowering in your market, I think a huge thing that we're seeing is people aren't chasing the next best salary. The reason why they're looking is more so to get behind a company's mission and align with the values. And then most importantly is working on the next best exciting project. And so that's a huge reason. I think, people I have seen are also kind of taking a little bit of a cut to work on something that they're really behind, which is exciting. And then also I think the talent pool changing, supply and demand of the market and the candidates on the market versus maybe even a couple of years ago. Employers really aren't offering those large sign-ons to attract talent to get them to leave their current company. Employers are realizing that the market's change and that the demand and supply for candidates is a bit different. So they don't have to, throw out large numbers to get people in the door.
Yeah. And I think bonuses is a really good place to kick off with. I know we sort of spoke about it a little bit earlier, but counter offers and bonuses are also things that come up quite a lot in our salary guide. And interestingly enough, 16% of the respondents received a counter offer last year, which is down from 25% in 2023. I know we talk about the benefits of potentially not taking a counter offer, but I mean, Jayme, to your point there about people looking at missions and values, I guess what are your thoughts on that number decreasing?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think the candidates side, when they're ready to leave their company and they've made that decision, they're really confident in that decision. They're only interviewing and spending time with companies that, again, they value, they're behind their mission. And so when they do secure that offer and they go to put in their notice, like they're a lot more confident that, the decision to leave is their final decision. So we're seeing that where candidates just aren't, moving forward and accepting those counter offers. And then another thing is the flip side of the companies. We're not seeing companies provide those counter offers as much because if say they were facing layoffs or they have budget constraints, they just cannot get that approval to offer more financials if someone is leaving for, say, a higher package or whatever that looks like. So yeah, they're just not as popular and people aren't giving them and people aren't taking them and just more confident in the decisions to stay or leave.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Jayme, that was awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
And then finally, let's just very, very briefly on bonuses, because years gone by, people have always been talking about bonuses. And I know, Jayme, you mentioned things like sign-ons and people not being able to do that anymore, or with the market supply being slightly different, employers don't feel like they're compelled to offer that anymore. It's quite interesting because 61% of respondents actually received a larger bonus last year than they did the year before. So it's risen from 22%. And 15% was actually the average bonus received, which is lower than it was the year before. So the year before was 20%, but still people are getting them. So do you think employers are really relying on bonuses maybe as a way to retain staff rather than maybe pay reviews? Just going to throw that out to anybody.
I think that's a funny question because I think it is so industry specific, right? I think that there are, especially in like financial services, right, that people rely on those bonuses so heavily, and that's kind of the risk you're taking is your salary disparity from year to year could change so much. But I think that what we saw more post-pandemic is trying to find other ways of retaining employees other than bonuses. I think people got so burnt in big tech when they were offered these huge RSU packages, huge bonus packages, and then, well, they didn't really get paid. And what you were expecting and planning for and benchmarking in your life, it got all turned upside down. So I think that there has to be so many other ways to retain staff that isn't just a couple of lottery tickets.
And that's something that we're gonna touch on in a minute in regards to gender and diversity. But before we do, and before we continue, I'd actually just like to quickly mention as well, that we do personalize our salary reports. So whether you're looking to augment your team, maybe replace a departing team member, or hire a contract worker, we can create personalized reports, which sort of go a step further than our guide in giving you the specific insight you might need to make informed decisions around your hiring strategy. So if you do want to have a report, there is a link below that will allow you to create that based upon where you're hiring. Now, to your point there, Sam, about retention of staff, and we will dive into this in a lot more detail when we launch our diversity in data and AI guide a little bit later this year. But there were a couple of stats of interest that I did just want to flag. So first and foremost, I guess 75% of all respondents study the STEM field, which is not shocking in terms of the nature of what these roles are and what is required, especially on the more advanced algorithm development side. But interestingly enough, on average, male respondents earned 16% more than their female counterparts. And 25% of the respondents were female, and that is only up 0.5% from 2023, but is actually less than it was in 2021, which was at 27%. So I guess, thinking about why potentially we didn't have a huge increase in female professionals a little bit more rapidly. I guess from my perspective, when we talk about things like retention, we know that female professionals are underrepresented in the industry, and we can't just invent more people to come into that, right, if they're not already in the system. And that starts with the education piece and the training and the development, which does take time. I think from my perspective, it is good news that there are more women now going into college to study data-related fields. And I think this comes back to things that are more accessible at high school level with, your robotics clubs and stuff like that was not available a couple of years ago. But I think from a retention statistic, it's really important that people who are already in the field, how do we grow and develop staff in order to retain them that is not monetary related? Mm-hmm. So things like, I don't know, upskilling is huge right now. And potentially not even always hiring somebody with a STEM background, but somebody who's got the aptitude to learn, and also provides differentiation of thought. That could be a really, really good way of us looking at it from that perspective. I guess, Sam, what's your thoughts on that?
Seems like a great place to plug Rockborn, to be honest with you, but I don't know if now's the time about bringing more diversity into the data workforce. But I think from my experience with clients itself, we're constantly asked, right? It's to find or underrepresented minority candidates, right? And it's a huge push, right? But the question that our job is, and that is, we're obviously tasked with finding the most qualified candidates, but how do we have that conversation with our clients to educate them on the market, right? If you are trying to hire someone who looks different than other people in the room and thinks different than other people in the room, then what are you doing as a client or as an employer to actually make someone want to join and stay? And so companies who are committed to adding more diverse workforces, they're doing it in a lot of different ways, but a lot of it is around support. A lot of it is doing it early and often and then keeping it as a constant conversation. And that only makes it easier down the line. Once you get so much of the same, it's going to be even further, right? It just even furthers the gap. And it's just really important for us in this space who are doing the recruitment and are as an extension of our client is to have that conversation with them, right? What are you doing to make somebody want to join, right? You're not the only person or the only employer who's looking to bring on more talent, but how can you make yourself stick out? And there's tons of ways through the interview process, through conversations that are being had, to creating initiatives, to creating days completely committed to X. I think there's so many different things that companies can do rather than just say, oh, we care about diversity, right? And so I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I know we'll do it more when the diversity guide comes up, but That's a great question. I know, Jayme, you've done a lot within this space too, so I want to make sure that you have a chance to talk about it.
Yeah. I think from my angle, I think companies, even Harnham as an agency within the recruitment space in tech, can be strategic with the partnerships that they're working with. So for us here at Harnham, for example, to support diversity hiring for our clients is joining groups such as Women in Data, where we're able to, network and be at events or help with resume reviews to help these, candidates stand out amongst the rest. And I think also it's our duty as an agency in this space to motivate the hiring managers that we're working with to join mentorship programs and help at local colleges or sit on boards. So that way, like Jenni, you were saying, is we can, attract the younger talent to get into these programs and then, change the supply of the professionals that are going to be in this space down the line. And then, Sam, like you were saying, Rockborn. I mean, Rockborn is an amazing program that brings a diverse range of talent from those non-STEM backgrounds, train them, deploy them, and get them placed at our clients. So I can't speak highly enough of what Rockborn's doing. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of those types of organizations pop up as diversity hiring becomes much more important to these companies.
I think what both of you guys said was spot on. One of the numbers or statistics that came out of our guide was in this section that surprised me the most, overall and specifically with diversity, because we get asked about it almost on a daily basis. But what we found through our survey is only 21% of respondents reported working for a company with actual diversity initiatives in place. And to me, that was a little bit shocking. So Sam, to your point of really digging in and kind of putting it back on the companies that are asking us for, diverse candidates, it is the key. Until that number increases significantly, it's going to be hard to correct this core issue and bridge this gap.
And I don't want to completely throw it on our clients, right? It's not just them. Do you know how much easier it makes our job? Because I'm a little like self-serving at times too, when there actually is a diversity initiative in place, how much easier it is to sell a candidate on the role and get someone really excited for something. People care about that. They want to work in those situations, and it does kind of create obviously a diversity of thought, but high performing teams as well. So when you can do it, I mean, it is just such a gold mine of bringing in strong talent. But all right, I'm done. I'm off my pedestal.
No, I think it loops really nicely back to what we said earlier about why people move and I guess the reasons for joining a company. And it's about values and mission driven. So it all ties back in, and that has more importance or weight than actually the salary they're requesting, which is why there was a drop, I would assume. Great. Just a couple more stats on the diversity side that I thought were quite interesting to state. And like I said before, we will go into much more detail a little bit later in the year with our diversity and data and AI guide. But actually 6% of respondents actually identified as disabled. 40% of those identified these as a mental health issue, and 24% were defined as cognitive or learning. So something interesting that we'll probably pick up on, because a lot of the roles that we recruit for have things like testing or timed things in interview processes. And it might be something that we really need to think about over the next 12 months. So I'm really interested to see how that might evolve. And then finally, 52% of respondents were white and 26% were Asian or Asian American. So really interesting stats. Like I say, we'll get onto them in a bit more detail, but I want to make sure we've got some time for some of the questions that came through, because we've had some good ones. So I guess, Sam, I'm going to come to you first. This is a question from Vitali, and he asked, where do you draw the line between AI and ML during an assessment? What skills might a specialist in machine learning lack compared to a professional in AI?
Oh, I think that is so case by case. And I hate to, Natalia, I appreciate the question, but it is really, really difficult, because what AI means at one organization might mean a little different the next. When a company says they're hiring for an AI engineer, what does that mean? Does that mean that they are looking for a machine learning engineer who can work with language models? And so that line is often moved. And so I think it's our job as the recruiters is to help ask those questions is what does a client really need? There's core machine learning things that I would say when someone is looking for a machine learning assessment. Say, can you productionize something? Can you deploy it? Can you make sure it's working the way you need it to be working? But the line between AI and machine learning is often blurred, and often it's that center of the Venn diagram. So Vitaly, well, I appreciate the question. It's so case by case. I wish I could give you a little more there, but it's relatively synonymous at times and relatively sometimes keeping up with the Joneses because their competitors doing it. If you've any specific questions, I'm happy to take it offline, but that's a tough one.
Nice, thank you. And then I guess, Kyle, coming to you next, we've got a question from, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Zenu Lebeden. How are you all seeing the market and salaries evolving currently for seniors and executive level roles? So this might be what everybody wants to comment on based on location, but Kyle, why don't we start with you for the South and West?
I think it's kind of strange for our market out here. They have corrected a little bit, like we saw a lot of the salaries and the data that we went over, but not as drastically, I don't think, potentially as the coast. And that was, I think it's mainly driven from a lot of companies have relocated into more central during COVID, and when office space wasn't as much office space wasn't as needed, they've looked at overhead. So we've actually seen a positive impact for senior and executive level roles. I will be really interested to see as we continue through this correction and see where we land on equilibrium, what happens with those type of roles in our territory, in like the Southwest and Midwest specifically, because I think it probably will, maybe adjust a little bit, but it's still pretty good. Sam, what are you seeing?
Follow big tech. I mean, I hate to say that, but I mean, that's always how it kind of goes is how big tech is paying when big tech is having layoffs. That's would be my main thing is when big tech is throwing salaries really high, companies have to compete in some way. And yeah, they compete in a lot of different ways. It's not always going to be on comp. Sometimes it's around flexibility. Sometimes it's on innovative products. But until the FANGs start doing something, that's kind of the way it goes. And that's not in all cases. But if I had like an anecdotal answer, it would be follow big tech's money.
One other point on that, specifically around the market, when I do talk to senior level, executive level candidates, I always mention this is the jobs are always a little more few and far between. Because if you think of an executive at a major company, they could have anywhere from 50 to a few hundred people reporting up through them. So there is just naturally less of them out in the market. So having patience and really understanding something that we discussed earlier of like, what does the right opportunity look like for me? And if you're working with a recruiter, really explaining that, and then seeing what's out in the market, seeing what opens up over time. They're so few and far between at times out there because there's less of them in the market.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, I just add one more thing to that. I think, not to reiterate the points everybody has said, I think it also depends on the size of the company that you're going for as well. So if we think about more smaller startups, they don't have the money necessarily to be paying these high salaries or competing with, as Sam mentioned, like, your big tech companies. So I think it's really important to think about what is important to you because they tend to offer a little bit lower on a base and then maybe an equity or something like that as an incentive for you to grow that company. And from a market as a whole, I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see a huge number of senior level roles, even executive level roles in the AI space and how that evolves. Things around AI governance and AI ethics and things like that, as well as, maybe a chief AI officer, which we've seen quite a big growth in there. And now chief data officers are really coming to the forefront. Cool. I just want to make sure we get time for some of these other questions. So we've also got a question from Matt here. maybe Jayme, we could start with you. Are there any common misconceptions when it comes to hiring in the space right now? Or what's been the most surprising finding for you from the guide this year?
I would say for like misconceptions, I think, sometimes companies can still have that mindset as, and especially for higher level individual contributor roles, more money it will keep them here. More money will get them to come to this company. But like I said prior, I think candidates are really, not chasing the dollar amount as much. They're really looking for the right culture fit. A lot of companies around flexibility, other benefits. So I think taking away the throw money at a candidate and they'll come our way conception is incorrect. I think, the most surprising for me is, and I guess maybe surprising / unfortunate, is the decrease in number of women in data. I feel like I've personally talked to a lot of women in data and have placed a lot of women. So I'm just upset that we're not seeing that number go up, but it's just in our hands to take control of changing that stat.
Nice. Yeah, same here. Does anybody else have a comment to that question? Anything different?
I think just from the employer side, when I think about the misconception, when you're hiring and you're interviewing, and if you're not looking at every single touch point you're having with a candidate for a potential role as a speed dating, as we have to make them like us, I kind of have news. It's like, you're not the only sexy opportunity out there. And I hope you can see my eyebrows when I say that. Like, there's other opportunities for these people. And so if you're not creating some value in a tech interview, hey, if you're not giving a problem that is relevant to what you're working on and showing that your technical team is fun to work with and good collaborators, that you're just giving someone a HackerRank problem and saying, go figure it out. Like, you have to create value in every single one of these touch points, because for top people on the market, the ones that every company wants to employ is the top talent. You're not the only opportunity. And so I think there's a misconception that if we give them an offer, they're going to accept. Like, no, you have to create value in each one of those touch points, from the intro to how the HR speaks to them, to the tech interviews, to your CEO at the end, maybe whatever it is. If you're not creating value in each one of those interviews, don't think you're the only option out there. And I think that that's a huge, huge piece. Is there's always something next door for people who are really hot in the market.
Great, thank you.
That's really good. One other point that I'll quickly add to that, and it kind of hits on what Sam is talking about. I think this last year, one misconception in the market in general, but to do with interview processes, with all the changes and the different landscape that we saw in 23, some hiring teams think that they don't have to move as quickly, but good talent is good talent, and they're going to be on and off the market very quick. We saw that a lot during the pandemic and 18 months ago. So some companies will slow down process and take more of a methodical time, but good talent will be on and off the market within a matter of days sometimes still.
Yep. Perfect. Well, that unfortunately is all we've got time for today. We've run over ever so slightly, but the salary guide link is in the comments for those of you that are keen to get your hands on a copy straight away. There's also a landing page on the Harnham website in case you need it, which is just www.harnham.com. It's worth also mentioning just again that Harnham are offering free personalized salary reports. And this is for businesses that are perhaps thinking about scaling teams or maybe just sense checking their internal benchmarks. We dive into the unique data of where you're based and really provide a tailored report for you. So reach out to us if this is of interest. But thank you everybody for tuning in today. And thank you, Kyle, Sam, and Jayme for your valuable insights.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Have a good day.